Welcome back to another episode of my podcast, Expats in Ukraine. Today, my guest is Rhys. He's not only a guest, but he's also my friend. Rhys is a humanitarian and founder of Together with Ukraine charity project. So, Rhys, before I ask you why the heck are you in Ukraine, I want to kind of start off with an icebreaker. I'm starting to do this kind of like new thing where I try to break the ice so we get comfortable talking to each other. So it's going to be a this or that kind of thing.
Cool.
Okay, so пельмени or вареники?
Vareniki.
Reniki, okay. Double-decker bus or marshrutka?
Double-decker bus.
Okay, because he's from the UK, so. Yeah, steering wheel on the left side or the right side?
Left side.
Left side,
Yeah.
okay. Okay,
Yeah.
that's very European, American as well. Okay, and also Norwich or Kyiv?
Kyiv.
Kyiv.
100%. No
Okay,
question.
yeah, so if you haven't figured it out, so yeah, Rhys from the UK, he's from Norwich. So why are you here in Ukraine, Rhys?
So it's a question that I get asked all the time. And to be honest, my history with Ukraine goes back around 15 or 16 years originally. I haven't been living in Ukraine for as long as that, but my history with the country started around 2007, 2008. So I moved to London to start university, and one of the first people that I met there was a guy who's still my best friend to this day. His name's Pavlo, and he was from Ukraine, from Lviv specifically. And back then, he was like, I have to show you Ukraine. You've got to come on holiday, check it out. It's amazing. And I'd never met anybody from Ukraine before, but I decided, all right, let's give it a shot. So Pavlo and I came to Ukraine back then, 15, 16 years ago, had a few trips, went to Kyiv, went to Lviv, went to Crimea, and had just an amazing time. And over the years, we continued to come back on holiday. We remained close friends. And just, as I say, over the years, we just built up a network of friends here and just enjoyed coming back to Kyiv and Ukraine in general more and more frequently. So then as time went by, I was looking for a bit of a change of scenery after being in London for a long time. And I thought, where in the world could I move to? What would make sense and what would be an interesting change of pace for me? So I settled on coming to Kyiv, and that was about 3.5 years ago, and I haven't looked back ever since.
Oh, wow, so the first time you came here was 2008, you said?
2008 was my first
2008, and you
trip.
said you went to Crimea.
Went to Crimea, yeah. Went to Kazantip Festival, for those that know.
Okay. I'm not familiar. What is that?
So it was a big, long festival on the beach in Crimea, in just a small little village. And they had just incredible lineups of international dance music DJs.
Okay.
And the festival went on for weeks on end back then, and you could buy a ticket and go in and out as much as you like. So we came one summer, and I think it was my first ever music festival experience of my life.
Oh, wow.
And so coming over as a teenager from the UK, coming into this environment, this crazy Kazantip environment in Crimea, it was honestly like a super eye-opening experience, and just kind of set the tone for my adventures in Ukraine, basically.
Yeah, and I'm so jealous because I've never been to Crimea ever since I moved to Ukraine. It was 2015. It was already occupied by then. And, I've been to other beach cities, like Skadovsk or something like this, Odessa. And I always heard sure, these places are nice, but Crimea was like beautiful.
Yeah.
What was it like there when you were there?
Well, my experience there was really centered around the festival, so I didn't see too much outside of the kind of small town where the festival was located. But for sure, I know that the scenery is incredible. People were super friendly, and it just seemed like an incredible place to be. And to be honest, it's a shame I didn't get to spend more time there. But my experiences of Crimea are only positive from that trip.
Yeah, and how did you get to Crimea? You just flew?
Yeah, we flew from London to Kyiv, and then we took a connecting flight from Kyiv down to Simferopol, which is like a small airport down there, and then took an interesting taxi ride for about an hour and a half from the airport down to where the festival was.
Oh, wow, and this was like a yearly festival, right?
Yeah, annual festival every summer.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how many years it ran for, but it ran for a long time.
Yeah. Okay, so you've come back many times to Ukraine. What makes Ukraine so special? Because a lot of people I talk to, they say oh, you're from the US, I would love to go to the US, live there. Why do you keep coming back to Ukraine? And I get this question a lot, so I want to see your answer here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that I get a lot as well, and I think it's just a very underrated country generally, in terms of it's so diverse. There's so many different types of cities with different vibes and atmospheres. The people are super friendly. The food is delicious. There's just so many good things about Ukraine which don't really get spoken about, particularly from the UK. The idea of coming to Ukraine on holiday is a really unusual concept. Maybe the language barrier is something to do with that. But certainly people from the UK don't ordinarily come to Ukraine, and I've always liked to do things a little bit differently. But I think the fact that I had my best friend from Ukraine was, unusual, and that kind of opened the door for me. But yeah, and so coming here with him, we would just come back time and time again and just have a better time each time we came. So
Yeah. And so now that you live in Ukraine, and when you were here in 2008, there wasn't a war going on, so safe country, right? And then you came after the war, after 2014. How does your family feel about this?
Well, my family were not overly thrilled. When I said I was moving to Ukraine, which was in 2020, this was before the full-scale invasion. So it was a slightly different situation, although there was obviously everything that was going on since 2014. So they weren't exactly thrilled when I mentioned it, but my family trust me and they know that I will make the decisions which I feel are correct and right and safe as best as I can. And then when the full-scale invasion started, then it was a slightly different situation it was harder for me to justify being here to members of my family. But by that point, I'd already been with my now wife. And so I had a real strong connection to the country and a real good reason to be here. So I think had that not been the case, it probably would have been harder to justify me coming back since February 2022.
Well, of course. And you've been here, your first time here in 2008, you said. Yeah, mine was 2015. And I noticed the country has changed so much. I remember one of my first experiences on the metro. I was on the metro and I had my smartphone. I think in 2015 or 16, it was iPhone 5 or 6. I didn't have the newest one. I had iPhone 5, 5S or something like this. But I was looking around everybody and everyone had these button phones, or they're reading maybe newspapers or something like this. And then as the years go by, now everyone has a smartphone. And it's changed so much in this way, because smartphones at the time in the US, it was quite common. Everyone had at least an iPhone 4 or something around this time. But here in Ukraine, it's smartphones weren't really that common because they were quite expensive, the first generations of these. And this is one thing I can pinpoint that's changed, Ukraine's become so technologically developed since then. There's so many tech companies coming out of Ukraine. I mean, before the full-scale invasion, there were so many based in Kyiv, especially in Dnipro, but a lot of them moved to kind of Europe, and it's such a shame. But since you've been here since 2018, so you probably witnessed a lot of changes in Ukraine. What's changed for you? What are the biggest changes?
So Kyiv especially, I think, has changed the most as far as all the places in Ukraine that I've been. I remember it back when I first came, and it definitely was a lot less developed, a lot less, I want to say, Europeanized, or a lot less seeming more like a European capital as far as the quality of restaurants, the quality of bars, cultural changes, new bars, clubs, restaurants opening. It feels like it's really thriving in terms of its cultural trajectory is really moving in a positive direction. And so that's probably the biggest overall change that I would say I've seen since I first came. And I would say even within the last 5 years or so, it just feels like it's been exploding in a really kind of positive direction and just going, as I say, new places opening, new bars, new restaurants, new clubs. It's just, seems like it's really moving in the right.
It's such a shame because I worked for tech companies, startup companies, and there was so many, and they all had such really good products. And then unfortunately, I kept, not unfortunately, but I kept contact with, some of my previous colleagues. And unfortunately, a lot of them kind of moved out of the country because they don't feel safe having a headquarters or one of their offices in Kyiv or Dnipro or something like this. It's super unfortunate. And I really hate that, this is, I don't know, it was so up and coming, Kyiv, especially Ukraine. And Russia kind of just took all this away.
Yeah, I have to give credit to all of the folks here who are still opening new places, still doing their best to try and make things work, even despite the challenges. And there are so many of them, so many entrepreneurs who are opening places, and even despite everything that's going on, they're doing their best to ensure that Ukraine continues on its positive trajectory, which is really, really admirable.
Well, yeah, and then nightlife was also quite good before as well. I mean, they were calling Kyiv the next Berlin or something, mini Berlin or something like this.
Yeah, there was tons of places that were really rivaling the more established European clubs. So coming from a music industry background, I was very in tune with what was going on here and new places opening and what people in Europe were saying about Kyiv and how it was perceived. And those places, obviously, they've had a harder time of it over the last 2 years, but they're still doing great things. And some international artists are still coming over, even despite the logistical problems. They're still coming over and playing in these places. And I think they're coming away with really surprising experiences as to how amazing the scene is here.
Well, of course. And, I'm a part of this Telegram group, and this Telegram group, they show you kind of like all of these events, party events, stuff like this. And they have something called, which I find like really interesting. It's called day raves. I've never been to one, but they start like, I don't know, 1 or 2 p.m. And then they play like, house techno music, and they have a rave up until like, 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. or something like this?
Yeah, I mean, you have to adapt to your circumstances.
Well, of course,
Of
yeah.
course, with the curfew, you have to find a way around it. And if that means doing an event during the day, then of course that's an alternative option, which, I mean, they've kind of forced their hand, of course. There's no other option than to do that. But as I say, it's just another example of promoters and organizers trying to find ways to make things work in challenging times.
Yeah. And like, how do you feel about this? Like people are, there's a war going on. And when it comes to, you're in the entertainment industry, do you think it's like the right time to kind of have these kind of parties? Or is it just people need to unwind somehow?
I think it's a difficult question because on the one hand, there are a lot of people making very difficult sacrifices right now in large parts of the country for the sake of everybody else within the country, including myself. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, I can understand why those people are potentially annoyed if they see people having, living their best life and having a great time. On the other hand, for people who are here, particularly maybe the younger generation, it's understandable that they would want to have some kind of emotional release, because imagine, you're facing this existential crisis, and you need to have some way of releasing that. And if that means having some drinks with your friends and going out to a club for 5 hours just to, improve your mental health, if nothing else, then I can understand why people would want to do that. And I don't think that it's necessarily bad that they're allowed to do that.
Yeah, and what I find interesting, there's people that are 22 years old right now, and they've never experienced kind of like a life where they can go out and, have fun and party. Because, COVID for a couple of years, and then the full-scale invasion. And it's like so interesting, have these young people that never really experienced kind of like nightlife.
Yeah,
in Ukraine or something like this.
I really feel for the people who are in that age group who have had to deal with COVID, followed straight up by the full-scale invasion. They haven't had the chance to live that kind of time in their lives that most people get to have, at least from Western countries. So yeah, I feel for those people, and that's why I don't begrudge it if they want to go and check out a club. Just to experience that if they can.
Yeah. And what I want to talk about now, because we're talking about like your entertainment background, if you will, you were in my neck of the woods. You were in LA, right?
I was. So my mum was American. So despite I grew up in the UK, but when I was age 21, I finished university and decided that I wanted to go to America to try and see if I could
American
find
dream, huh?
The American dream, exactly. I went to California when I was a kid many times because my aunt and uncle lived there.
Yeah.
And
which city?
LA.
LA, okay.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And I always wanted to live there. I always had this kind of dream about living there. And so when I hit 21, it's obviously a good age to go to America.
Yeah, of course. There's nothing to do before then, bro.
No, exactly.
You can join the military, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't have a drink.
So I moved to LA at 21, and somehow or another, I found a job in quite a large entertainment talent booking agency, which was like my introduction to the Hollywood, film and TV and music world.
Yeah.
And so that's where I started. And I spent about 2 years out in LA working in that job. And it was super interesting. It was a really, really eye-opening time of my life. Obviously, young adult, you're finding your feet after university.
And what year was this, like 2006?
This was 2010.
2010,
so
okay.
Moved there in 2010, and I stayed there for 2 years. So yeah, 2012, I moved back to the UK after my kind of Californian adventure.
And have you met any celebrities while you were in LA?
I met Kim Kardashian.
Kim Kardashian?
Yeah, I don't know how
Were you one of her
boyfriends? No. Bumped into Paris Hilton in a club, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I mean, you can see the type of people that I was encountering while I was out there. But but yeah, those are two that come to mind, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I remember, so I was working at this restaurant for like a year or so, like in the US, and it was like in the Pasadena area. This is like where I'm from. And there was a lot of celebrities that would go to this restaurant. So I was fortunate enough to meet like so many interesting, like waiting on so many interesting celebrities like Nicole Kidman, Natalie Portman, Colin Farrell came in. Gwen Stefani.
I think your answer beats mine as far as the kind of celebrities
Well,
you're
I've been there a lot
okay.
longer than
True,
like
true.
2 years, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember I was at a bar with my friend. And you know that it was around the song, you know Hozier? It's like
Yeah.
an artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was around the time that song came out. Take him to church,
Yeah,
blah,
yeah.
blah, blah.
Yeah.
So anyways, I was at this bar, and then my friend, he's like a musician, and he's like, dude, like that's Hozier, the Take Me to Church guy. And I look, and I don't even know what he looks like. I just know the song. And so we like look at it on our phone, like, yeah, that is him. And he's sitting at this booth with like 6 or 7 like beautiful women, and then he's like in the middle, like, and he's actually really tall in real life. But anyways, and so my friend, he was like, oh, I'm a huge fan of his. I'm like, do you want me to go like say hi? He's like, no. He's like embarrassed. I'm like, I'm gonna say hi. So I go over there, I say, hey, my friend's a big fan of yours. Can we get a photo? And he was like super nice about it. He was like, yeah, of course, man. Yeah, is he from the US? I don't think he's from the US, right?
I'm not sure, to be honest. Like, I know the song, I know the artist, but I don't know much about the backstory. But
yeah. But anyways, he was like super kind about it, and he took a photo, and it made my friend's day. And
Awesome.
I guess it's just like an LA story, you know? You're just at a bar and you see like, oh my gosh.
I think if I'd have stayed there longer, I probably would have had more stories. But yeah, my time there, it was really dominated by working, honestly. You know, when you're first starting out your career, you kind of take these roles where you are doing a lot of the grunt work, so to speak. So I didn't get to see and experience the sunshine California lifestyle as much as I maybe would have wanted. But
you didn't go surfing, man?
No surfing, unfortunately.
Damn it.
But yeah, it was still fun. I really enjoyed it, and it was an interesting time in my life. But I was soon to go back to the UK.
Okay, I'm trying to build like a timeline in my head. So Ukraine 2008.
Yeah.
Just visiting, and then for the festival, and then you moved to the US for a couple of years, and then you're back in London, right?
Yeah, that's right.
What are you doing in there?
So when I left my job in LA, I decided to continue on this path of working in entertainment. So I took a job working for a record label, a dance music record label called Hospital Records. And I basically worked, I spent the last, in total I spent around, almost 10 years working with different record labels, specifically around events. So promoting, organizing large-scale events, music festivals around the globe. But I was based in London, doing a lot of traveling, did some tours around the US, around Asia, Europe, so all sorts, but really working with record labels and helping them to promote their artists in the international market.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how many years was that, like in London?
So in London, I was there, so I moved back in 2012, and in total, I was there for another 8 years. So through till 2020. And then obviously 2020, March 2020, if you're working in the events world, when COVID hit, it was like everything that I'd worked for the last, 8 years, pretty much just fell off a cliff, like overnight.
And the obvious thing to do is move to Ukraine, right?
Exactly, yeah. So, I thought, I need to change my situation. So when the COVID lockdown hit in March, I remember had a conversation with my colleagues where we all kind of sat down and was like, well, we're not really going to be able to do anything for the foreseeable future, so we'll have to take an indefinite time out. And in London, our lockdowns were very, very severe. You could only leave the house like once a day, for a walk, it was like a dog, So I spent most of 2020 just inside, honestly, thinking about my life, thinking about changes I would like to make and how could I improve my situation or just make some drastic changes. And so it was at that point when I thought, okay, I need to get out of London. As soon as this is all over, I need to get out of London. Where should I go? And obviously, Ukraine was it was the natural choice. So that was kind of what prompted me to make it.
And you chose Kyiv?
Chose Kyiv, yeah. Because we'd been coming to Kyiv in the past more than anywhere else in Ukraine.
Who's we? Your friend
Pavlo and I,
okay.
yeah. So we've been coming together to Kyiv many times. We kind of had built up a little bit of a network of friends, and the city was kind of a second home, if you like. So it was the obvious choice.
Yeah, and which area of the city were you living in when you first came?
When I first came, I was living in Pechursk.
Pechursk? Yeah. It's a really good area.
Yeah, it was nice, not too far from the center, but not, right in the center. But I wanted to kind of, as I say, I'd been to Kyiv many times and I'd experienced different areas of the city, and I thought Pechursk was just a nice place, and so I thought I'd give it a shot.
Yeah, I want to talk about like assimilating now. So you decided to live here, and it's been like 4 years or whatever it is. Your Ukrainian is very good, man. I've been here longer than you. My Ukrainian is so bad. Like, I'm sure I understand a lot, but speaking is just koshmar. It's very bad.
Yeah. I with the Ukrainian language, I knew that it was going to be important to learn it. I know that Ukraine, in recent years, there's a lot more English spoken than there was. I mean, we talked about what were the changes that were in place from when I first came in 2008 to the present day. I suppose another one is the use of English, out in restaurants or just, the local population speaking English. Back in 2008, it was a lot less frequent than you hear today. Nevertheless, I knew that learning the language was going to be important for me to really be able to experience everything that Ukraine had to offer. And also, I never wanted to be one of those foreigners who kind of comes here and like doesn't speak a word of the language. English people have a pretty bad reputation for that globally. You know, we kind of know that it's like, well, our language is the international language of the world, so why would I learn this language? But I think for me, I always had an intention to stay for a bit longer. So, you know, there was a reason for me to learn the language. And I actually started out speaking Russian. So just before I moved here, I studied Russian for a little bit. And the first year, so 2021, I spoke Russian. Not perfectly, but it was enough. And then after the full-scale invasion, when we came back to Ukraine, I decided that I had to learn Ukrainian because I didn't want to speak Russian anymore. I certainly didn't want to be in a position where you had a table full of people speaking Ukrainian, and I put my hand up and say, you know, sorry guys, can we switch to Russian just for my sake? It just didn't seem like the right thing to do. So that was really the impetus for me deciding to make the switch. And I think because I already had some knowledge of Russian, it was slightly easier for me to learn Ukrainian than it would have been if I had no knowledge of Russian, even though the languages are different.
When I first came to Ukraine, I decided to like learn more Russian because, you know, it's like this thought that every foreign person has. I think we discussed this before. It was like, okay, I can speak Russian here, people understand me. I can speak it in Georgia, I can speak it in Kazakhstan. You know, people can kind of like understand me in these countries. Whereas if I speak Ukrainian, it's like only like in Ukraine. Maybe you could, there's some cognates like in Belarusian or maybe Polish, you can kind of understand, but it's not the same language. So I fell into this trap as well. And I want to ask you, how important is it for foreigners, if they want to live in Ukraine, how important is it for them to learn Ukrainian?
I think it's important. I think it's important not just for practical reasons. Obviously, for practical reasons, once you go outside of Kyiv and once you go outside of the center, and you know, when you go into areas where there's less tourists, then there's a real practical use for it. Just in terms of understanding what people are saying and being able to go through life, you know, even with simple things like going to the post office or, you know, buying some bread or, you know, basic day-to-day things, there's a practical use for it. But also, even if everyone in the country spoke English and you didn't need to practically know it, I think it's more of a statement of intent that you care about the culture, that you're interested in it, and it makes sense that you put some effort in to learn it. You know, so I think it works on two levels, the practical and otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, like I speak Russian better than I could speak Ukrainian, and I just feel so embarrassed sometimes, like, especially ever since like the full-scale invasion. I'm like, wow, like, just like you said, I don't want to be the one like speaking like Russian. Like when people speak Russian, I can understand it, it's like pretty good. But when people speak Ukrainian, it's like a little more difficult. And I just feel so embarrassed because it's like, you love Ukraine, right? I'm like, yeah, you've been in Ukraine like almost 10 years, yeah? Do you speak Ukrainian? Not really.
Well,
it's kind of like so embarrassing.
Another thing is, if you want to go to Puzata Hata and you don't speak Ukrainian, yeah, you might be in trouble there.
If you go to Odessa, Puzata Hata, it might be a bit better.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's one of them where I just decided it was the right thing for me to do. I think for anybody else considering coming to Ukraine, it's definitely, it's a very useful skill. And also it's surprising, I think, to a lot of locals. They don't expect people from other countries necessarily to be speaking Ukrainian in a very advanced way. So, you know, also people can be talking about you and they might think you don't know what they're talking about, but actually you do, which is quite humorous sometimes. So, yeah, I think it's definitely a very useful skill.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask, have you been to like the southern parts of Ukraine, like Odessa, like Mykolaiv, Dnipro?
I went to Odessa once. I went to Dnipro once, but I haven't been any further than that, other than Crimea.
Okay, can you like see the difference in, you know, in the west of Ukraine, they speak more Ukrainian. In central Ukraine, like, you know, Kyiv or something like this, it's kind of like a mix, but mostly like more, I guess more Ukrainian now. Maybe before it was like a little more Russian, but it was like really close. And in the south, like Odessa, for example, it's mostly like Russian.
I think if you've spoken a language your whole life as your go-to language, like let's say you grew up in a Russian-speaking family or you went to a Russian-speaking school, whatever it may be, if you've spoken that language your entire life, then I get it, it can be difficult to just switch. You know, if someone says, okay, now we're speaking Ukrainian, it's not always just kind of a light switch, like, okay, I'll just switch. So I appreciate for some people who've grown up in those environments that, you know, as much as they might want to speak Ukrainian, it's difficult for them and your natural habits just kick in. So I don't think necessarily those people should feel bad about themselves, but also, you know, maybe it's worthwhile making some efforts to better understand the Ukrainian language so that you maybe in a year or 2 years or 3 years, maybe they do feel more comfortable to use it day to day. But certainly people right now, I think it's fair enough if you've spoken a language your entire life, you can't just switch it.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I remember because I know people that are they're like hardline on both sides. They're hardline like this is Ukraine, you should speak Ukrainian if you say you're Ukrainian. Or I know people on the other side saying, you know what, I grew up speaking this language, I love Ukraine, but I just want to speak whatever language I want because freedom.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and there's certainly some people in the middle, but I've met people like hardline on both sides. And my ex-girlfriend, she was very, proud pro-Ukrainian from the western of Ukraine, in Mukachevo area. And I remember one time after the full-scale invasion, we were on a train going from Mukachevo to Budapest. And on the train, there was these girls behind us, and these girls were speaking Russian. And she was getting so mad. She's like, I'm going to say something to them. I'm like, they're your fellow country people. I mean, they want to speak whatever language they want. I know it's important, but maybe we shouldn't like bother them. They're going through a tough time. Maybe they lost their homes in the eastern part. Who knows what their story is, but they're speaking Russian. And then they know I'm going to say something. And she said something, and it was like, I don't know. It's like the emotions were like running high.
Yeah, I think it's a very polarizing debate about whether or not it's right to speak Russian now as a Ukrainian after the full-scale invasion, but I think it really depends on the individual's circumstances. Sometimes I think if I see young children in Kyiv, like let's say under the age of 5, speaking Russian, that to me seems slightly more unusual because, particularly if you've grown up if you're in your early years and so you've known really nothing except for, the Russian invasion, then surely if your child is of a young age and they're just at that point where they're learning their first language or learning their most comfortable language, you would imagine that Ukrainian would be the sensible one. But again, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach to this. It really depends on the individual.
Yeah, I had another guest on. He was very closely tied with Pravy Sector. I believe it's my guest, Chris. He's like a photographer, really interesting guy. I consider him a friend now. Yeah, we hang out every once in a while. But I was asking him because Pravy Sector is kind of like right sector, kind of very like they were one of the first. Not one of the first. I don't want to say something that I may not believe that is true, but they were there in like Donbass, like 2014 or something like this. And so I asked him like, they must be really proud Ukrainians. He's like, yeah. I'm like, they all speak Ukrainian and stuff. He's like, no, some speak Russian, like whatever, speak whatever language they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very polarizing debate, I think, yeah. So, and there isn't really an easy answer to it. But I don't think I would go so far as to confronting Russian speakers. I think it very much does depend on the individual's upbringing, their circumstances, where they're from, what they're going through. But I think that it's worthwhile for people to make an effort to try and learn more Ukrainian, certainly just for the progression of Ukrainian culture.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have friends, like there was this girl I know, she was from Konotop. Konotop is like in Sumy Oblast. So it's like eastern Ukraine, near not too far from the border of Russia, whatever. And so, yeah, she's from there and she spoke Russian like this whole time. And then once the war happened, like full-scale invasion, 2022, she decided to switch. And I was asking my friends, like, what do you think about her accent when she switched? Like, you know what? Her Ukrainian isn't that, great. She does have an accent. She uses surzhyk a lot when she doesn't know words. But she's at least she's making an attempt. And then after it's been like a couple of years now, her Ukrainian is like perfect now.
Yeah. Well, with my situation with my wife, Irina, she was previously speaking Russian, but she changed to speaking Ukrainian. I mean, she's from Western Ukraine, so she had a very good understanding and knowledge of Ukrainian language before the full-scale invasion, but still, that was really the catalyst that made her decide, okay, no, I need to speak Ukrainian. So yeah, there was a very, very stark shift in the language that she used day to day.
Yeah.
And certainly that helps because when we're at home, if we want to switch from English, then we can speak Ukrainian. That's great practice for me. So.
Yeah. And what is the language that you two speak like amongst each other?
So about 90% of the time we speak English. Her English is excellent, and it's more than enough to have very deep conversations. But I like to practice Ukrainian. So if we decide, okay, we're kind of done with English for the day, we'll speak Ukrainian. And we have a lot of in-jokes, personal kind of, just little jokes between us, which are in Ukrainian. Sometimes it's things that I don't understand about the language, which she finds funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's about 90-10.
Yeah. And I want to ask, okay, before I move on from like this topic of, UK, US, and you're traveling a lot. So US, UK, Ukraine, can you rate them based on your experience where you would rather live?
So sort of like best, middle, and worst?
Yeah.
Ukraine number 1, UK number 2, US number 3.
Boo.
Sorry.
Podcast is over.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have to say, I think I prefer the UK to the US.
What is something that Ukraine does that's the UK and the US doesn't do? Like, right.
I mean, it's just, I personally enjoy my life here a lot more. And I understand that I'm from a different situation to many local Ukrainians. So perhaps my experiences here are different to many people. So I'm not blind to that. But equally, I think just in terms of, the quality of life that I have here is much, much better than it was in UK and US. And I suppose if I'm going to rate those countries, then I have to go off my own personal experience.
Of course.
And, I just think that the people are friendlier here. At least to me as a foreigner coming here, it's slightly unusual. So people are a little bit more intrigued and more friendly. So I just generally have had a really, really positive experience since living here. So that's why I would say it really beats the other two.
Oh no, I really enjoy my life in Ukraine. It's a lot. I guess the quality of life. It's because many different factors. People here are great. The prices are reasonable. Stuff like this. But I want to tell you like a quick story. So I remember on Instagram. So I lived in several cities. I've lived in Kyiv, Odessa, Mukachevo. I lived in Tbilisi, Georgia. I've lived in Zadar, Croatia. I've lived in Los Angeles, and then I lived in Porto. So I was just doing like a ranking, just like my favorite cities that I love to live in, and then just worst. And so I did like all the rating, Kyiv #1. I forgot what the rest were. Then it was just like second to last was Mukachevo. And then the last one was like LA. And I got so many messages like Mukachevo is better than LA. And I'm like, it's personal preference.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's personal preference. You have to go off your own experiences. And your experience in LA may be very different to someone else's. Likewise, your experience in Mukachevo, very different to someone else's. So
Yeah.
going off my personal experiences, Kyiv is definitely #1. And honestly, there's nowhere else that I would rather be. And that sounds really odd to a lot of people, particularly, I think, Ukrainians, because given that a lot of Ukrainians, obviously, maybe they don't want to be here right now, which is understandable. But for me, I'm very happy being here. And honestly, I wouldn't choose to be anywhere else. And I think that says a lot about what I feel about Ukraine and Kyiv specifically. I just enjoy my life here, and I think it's just a great city, and very happy to be here.
No, totally. And then when people were messaging me about this, my response was, okay, LA's a good city, there's nothing wrong with it, but when I'm doing like this rating, I'd rather live in any European city over any US city.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Well, likewise, I wouldn't be, even though I come from a half American background, I wouldn't be running back to live in the US anytime soon. I had my couple of years there, which was interesting and fun. But certainly, as I've gotten older, I've begun to realize it's not really the place that I want to be based, really, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think the same. Like, I feel a lot more comfortable in Europe. Europe does so many things right that the US doesn't do.
Yeah.
What is something you wish like more people knew about Ukraine, by the way? Like,
I suppose I wish more people just knew how diverse it was, because you have like seaside, you have mountains, you have great cities, you can do anything, and obviously the summer is a great time where it opens up many more opportunities for, great activities, resorts, and everything that you can do to have fun. So I suppose, as I say, it's a very underrated place, and not a lot of people really consider it as a place to visit. But I think the diversity of the country and how big it is, and there's so many places here and so many cool things to see that if more people knew about it, I'm sure more people would visit.
Well, yeah, it's a shame that the war is going on right now, and Ukraine is a relatively dangerous place. And a lot of Kherson is occupied, and Kherson was so diverse. They had deserts, they have the coast, they have this pink lake, this salty pink lake. I don't know, it's such a beautiful region. They have an island, like the biggest island in all of the Black Sea, Zharogach. It's in the Kherson Oblast. I remember I used to go there on vacation, the summer before the full-scale invasion and the summer before that. So 2 summers in a row, and I would go camping on Zharogach Island, and it was so beautiful, clear water. Sure, there was a lot of jellyfish, but I feel like this is just what's going on down there.
There was actually, speaking of the Pink Lake, there was a festival which was running before the full-scale invasion called Wave Spot, I think it was called, and it was kind of like a Burning Man-esque festival in the Kherson region, and I never got to go to it, but it seemed amazing, and again, it was just an example of like the incredibly diverse geography here and how there are so many cool things to see and do. So I suppose if I had to say one thing, that would probably be it.
Yeah, totally. Like, Ukraine is so diverse. It's like so big as well. I think, it depends like how you calculate, but they say Ukraine is like the biggest country in Europe. or it might be France because they have overseas territories, like whatever. But it's a huge country. Yeah, it's so diverse. But also, I want to talk about your personal life. Is that fine, Rhys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I heard you got married last week.
I did. So very fresh to being married, but yeah, feeling great about it, and it was an awesome event.
Yeah, I heard about it. Yeah, you told me all about it. It sounded like a lot of fun. And yeah, for all of you at home, Rhys married someone notable in Ukraine. So I always pronounce her last name wrong. It's Irina Soponaru.
Soponaru.
And
Yeah.
she's on Kvartal 95?
Yeah, she's part of Kvartal 95. She also has various other projects that she's working on. She's a judge on Liga Smecha, which is obviously a popular comedy show here. And she does a lot of plays, is on YouTube series with various colleagues. So yeah, she's very active in the entertainment world, but I suppose she's maybe best known for being part of Kvartal.
Yeah. And for all people at home that don't know what Kvartal 95 is, it's basically like the Saturday Night Live of Ukraine. And this is how Zelensky, I don't know how he got his start, but Zelensky was on Kvartal 95 as well, right?
Yeah, he was kind of running it. So yeah, she worked with Zelensky when he was still part of Kvartal.
wow.
So she still knows him.
They know each other personally?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Have
you met Zelensky?
I've never met him, no. But what I thought was quite funny, actually, is when you look at Zelensky's Instagram, he has I think something like 16 million followers or something, and he only follows about maybe 150, 160 people. So you look at who he's following, and it's like, Biden, Macron, Angela Merkel, and then there's just Irina in the mix with all these world leaders. It was just, kind of funny.
That's so cool, man. So how did you guys meet? How does just a normal guy like yourself, Rhys, how many followers does she have on Instagram? Like, I think it's 300, 400,000?
About 400K, something
400K,
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, but how did you meet her?
So I actually met her in a very organic way. I used to go to this bar in the center of Kyiv called Red Pizza. And,
Red what?
Red Pizza.
Okay, it's like Red Bird or something?
Rare Bird.
Okay, Rare Bird, okay.
So yeah, this was in 2021. I was going there a lot with my friends who I'd made since moving to Kyiv. And one night we were in there and I saw this girl just across the room. Decided, all right, I'm gonna go and say hello. I didn't know who she was, didn't recognize her or anything like that, and I just decided, well, what's the worst that can happen? I'll go and say hi. So went over to her, started talking to her, and when she asked me what are you doing here, and I said, I moved from London to Kyiv. She sort of looked at me and was like, are you some kind of fugitive? Are you hiding from the police or something? What are you doing here?
Humor, huh?
Yeah, and yeah, we just hit it off really well. We exchanged contacts, and we said, let's, maybe our paths will cross at some point. And then maybe a week later, I kind of contacted her and said, hey, nice to meet you. Do you want to go out? And then it kind of went from there, really. It was a very organic start of the relationship. So we went on a few dates. And actually, on our first date, that was when I realized that she was quite well known here. We went to this event in Kyiv, Art Zavod Platforma, kind of a daytime event. And so we met at the entrance.
And this was which year? 2020?
This is 2021.
21.
Yeah. So we met at the entrance, walked in, and then we hadn't been in the festival for more than about 2 minutes. And you had all these people running up to us saying oh, can I grab a picture? Can I get a picture? And this was our first date. So I had no idea really who she was. So yeah, that was quite interesting. It was kind of a funny experience, which I didn't expect.
Yeah, and so you're from the UK. You have kind of a different mindset than typically people from Ukraine. Sure, you speak the language, but what are the challenges you face, marrying a Ukrainian woman?
So I suppose in the past, because I'd come to Ukraine many times, and I'd kind of been familiar with, going on dates with Ukrainians, and I was obviously with Pavlo, my best friend being Ukrainian, he had given me some insights into the cultural differences between dating a Ukrainian and dating somebody from the West. So let's just say I was already kind of prepared for the changes and the differences, because there are obviously cultural nuances between dating Ukrainians and dating people in the West. Obviously, you can't generalize, but there are some things which hold true. And so I think I was already really prepared for that before I moved here and before I met her. But certainly, yeah, once you understand, I guess, the normal ways of communicating, the normal ways of working in a relationship, then it was pretty easy for me to get to grips with it. But yeah, Irina also, her previous partner was from the UK. So she had some experience
Oh,
of
okay.
being in a
She definitely has
relationship
a type, huh?
Clearly, she has a type. Yeah. So she had some experience of dating a guy from the UK as well. So I think those two things combined just meant that we were a good match, and we clicked very quickly.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So what's it like dating a celebrity though? Like I can tell you like a quick story. So I've never like dated like a celebrity or something like this. But one time I was like on Tinder, matched with this girl. We went out like on a couple dates, and then my flatmate, she's like, "Oh, you going on another date with this girl?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I showed her the picture because she was like, "Oh, can I see the picture?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And she's like, "Oh, wow, do you know who that is?" And I was like, "No." And she's like, "This is this one Ukrainian singer, like Vivian Mort or something like this. Her name's like Danielle in real life, Daniela." And I was like, "I don't know." And then she opened my flatmate opened like her YouTube channel, and she has like her music videos, like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of views on them. She's kind of like well known in like this kind of circle. And I was like, oh, wow, like that's her. I had no idea. Then like the second date we went on, because I found out after the first, I was like a little nervous at this point. So yeah, I was like, oh, wow, I was like, this is someone special, and I'm just like a random dude.
Yeah, I mean, I did have a little bit of that at the start. I thought, this girl's very famous, and I'm just some random English guy. So there was a little bit of that at the very beginning. But then I just thought, she's just a girl like everybody else. Although, granted, a lot of people know her, but she still was very down to earth, super easy to talk to. And I think the fact that I didn't know her before I started dating her helped. I think if I'd have spotted her and recognized her, then maybe I wouldn't have spoke to her in the first place.
Yeah.
But as far as dating her is concerned, like it's honestly, I find it quite amusing still, even now, like 3 years down the line, when people come up to her and ask for pictures, which happens all the time. And sometimes when we're places, we'll get like the manager of a restaurant will come over and be like, "Oh, I loved your show. Please have some food, have some drinks on us," which is obviously kind of a cool, a plus that we appreciate every time.
Yeah.
So I suppose there's certain things which are cool and kind of beneficial, but we don't like to milk it. We don't go around saying,
Yeah.
I'll post about your restaurant if you give us a free meal. It's nothing like that. So yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, maybe after this podcast, like people start coming up to you on the street.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. We've done some content, me and Irina together,
Yeah.
some online content. So, it wasn't really for the sake of me becoming well known. I mean, maybe people will recognize my face just by association with Irina, which would be quite funny because, yeah, that's not happened yet.
Yeah, through Arena, have you met anybody famous?
I've met a lot of people who are well known in the Ukrainian entertainment industry.
Yeah. Want to drop some names?
Lena Kravets.
Who?
Lena Kravets.
Oh, not Lenny Kravitz.
No, not Lenny Kravitz. No, Elena Kravets, Yuri Tkach, Yevgeny Koshevoy, Sasha Pekalov. People who are well known in terms of, the Ukrainian entertainment industry. If you watch TV, particularly if you watch comedy TV, you'll know who these people are. So, yeah.
Speaking of Lenny Kravitz, he's also kind of part Ukrainian, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure. I know he has kind of a varied background, but yeah, I don't know.
I heard he's
possibly.
like part Ukrainian or something like this. Anyways,
I wouldn't be surprised.
The other girl's Lena Kravitz?
Lena, yeah, Olena.
Olena Kravitz.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, Irina is quite notable. Her brand is Irina Sopanaru. Is she going to be Irina Sopanaro Rhys?
We didn't really talk about her taking my last name. I think maybe she will. Maybe it'll be a double-barreled last name, like Sopanaru Bainham or Bainham Sopanaru.
Yeah.
I don't think she's going to drop the Sopanaru because it's a cool name.
It's her brand.
And people know her as Irina Sopanaru. So maybe when it comes time to changing her passport, maybe she'll look at it. But yeah, as of right, today, I don't think so.
Yeah, Irina Bainham could be anybody.
Exactly. Yeah. No one's going to know who that is. Yeah.
Exactly. So, what I want to ask you again, because with my girlfriend, she doesn't really feel safe in Ukraine. And she kind of wants to leave the country. Right now, I love Ukraine. I don't want to leave, but we're talking about this and we're working through it. And you guys have this opportunity to leave. I mean, maybe your wife has a lot of work here in Ukraine, but do you guys see a future in Ukraine?
I do, yeah, and I think she does too. So we're aligned on that. I mean, neither of us want to leave. It's obviously so disappointing that we can't be living what we would consider to be a normal life right now, of course. But we want to stay in Ukraine. We're committed to staying in Ukraine, and we ultimately see our future in Ukraine. So I'm generally positive about the future here. And even though we do have the option to leave if we wanted to, it's not on our agenda. We're not planning to leave. Our whole life is here. Granted, I have my family and friends back in the UK. Her sister also lives in the UK, but you know, the majority of our friends and family are in Ukraine, and we're really committed to being here.
Oh yeah, and also speaking of friends and family in the UK, when you had your wedding, did a lot of your friends or family show up?
So actually, no. So I invited my friends and family to come over, and I invited maybe 40, 50 people, something like that. And actually only one person came, which was my friend from my hometown, like one of my oldest friends. He came over and he had a really interesting time here. Although he was only here for like a day and a half, even though he traveled 2 days to get here. He was here for a day and a half and he traveled 2 days to get back. But it was really nice to have somebody from, you know, my hometown, somebody who I feel kind of connects to my life in the UK.
Yeah.
But yeah, most people unfortunately didn't make it. Just the safety aspect, the
Yeah, of course.
logistical aspect of everything, it just put them off. And we'll do like a smaller event in the UK to celebrate the wedding with my people in the UK as well. So
Yeah. Okay, right on. And have your parents ever met Irina?
my parents have met Irina, yeah, and they get along really well with her. But my parents have never met Irina's parents, actually.
Oh, is that gonna be a problem?
I don't think so. I mean, there's no shared language, let's put it that way. So we would have to be translators. But that's normal, I think, for people who are in a couple where you're from different countries with different languages. But I do think it's kind of funny that we're married and our parents have never met. I don't know how common that is, but...
Yeah, I mean, I tend to get along better with my friends' parents or my girlfriend's parents that don't speak English.
Yeah.
It's just like, duh.
Yeah. Smile and
More
nod.
food, duh. Okay.
I mean, fortunately, I can communicate pretty well with her parents, which is great, and we get along really well. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nice, man. You seem very happy. I want to congratulate you on that.
Thank you very much.
But yeah, I know you said that you do like some humanitarian work as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about this. What is this organization? It is. Let me check. Together with Ukraine.
Yeah. So
how did you found this?
So Together with Ukraine. So this project came about kind of as a result of my work in the music industry for 10 years. So it was, I think, about 48 hours after the full-scale invasion. So let's say February 26th. And I get a call from my friend Vlad Yaremchuk, who is a promoter here. He's the booker for Atlas Weekend Festival, which is basically the biggest music festival in Ukraine. And he called me and said, I really want to do something to try and, you know, drum up support and financial aid and just awareness of what's going on in Ukraine. So we had a call and we decided, let's do an album. Let's do a charity album. Let's reach out to our contacts, because for my 10 years working in the industry, he'd been working in the industry for many years as well. We knew that together we had a lot of contacts across the industry. So we went into just like overdrive, contacting people who we knew. We decided on a format for the album. We specifically wanted to make it to do with dance music, and even more specifically to do with drum and bass, which was a genre where we both had a lot of experience, we had a lot of contacts. So we started the process of reaching out to the biggest record labels that we knew and artists, and we had a great response from you know, everybody we spoke to. They were like, yes, how can I help? And we said, well, would you like to submit a track free of charge? We'll put it onto this compilation album and we'll sell it. We'll package it up as, you know, we'll make some kind of brand for it and we'll sell it, and all the proceeds go to, you know, charities or humanitarian organizations of our choice. So we started that process, I think it was on a Sunday. And then by the time it got to the following Friday, the album was already launched and it was out there and it was selling. Oh, wow. So we basically just dropped everything for about 5 days. Myself, Vlad, and we had a few other friends of ours who helped us out. So, you know, they were instrumental to making it happen. But it was one of those things where when we spoke to some artists, we spoke to some labels, they spoke to their friends and they spoke to their friends. And before we knew it, we had other artists reaching out to us saying, can I help in any way? Can I submit a track? I'd love to be part of this. So we decided that originally we were gonna, well, first of all, we thought we were gonna get maybe like 50 tracks or something like that. But we ended up having 136 tracks from all different artists. And we packaged them up onto this album, which we called Together with Ukraine, which actually is here. Very on brand. So we created this album and we decided, let's just get it launched as soon as possible because the situation is absolutely critical right now. Let's just get it out there. Yeah. And so we decided to make it a donation album. So we had a minimum donation of £12. It's about $15. Yeah. But you could donate absolutely anything, so upwards of that amount. And we thought maybe we were going to get, let's say, £10,000 or 15,000. We had some ideas as to what we might raise. Within the first 24 hours, we already had £50,000, which was like, I think it's like $70,000 in the first day. And so we realized that we were onto something. And we'd chosen as our charity, we had chosen the Ukrainian Red Cross Society, which is just an all-Ukrainian humanitarian organization. So they do all sorts of things. So evacuating civilians from occupied territories, accommodation for internally displaced people, materials for reconstructing houses, hospitals, food, medical supplies, basically the whole spectrum of humanitarian causes. So we decided to make them our charity of choice. And yeah, as soon as the money came in, literally every day, I made a transfer over to the Ukrainian Red Cross Society, and it just kind of went from there. And we're already proud of it, and it's still selling even to this day.
Oh, wow.
2 years and 3 months down the road, it's still selling. And so now we've raised over $150,000, pound equivalent, for various charities. Most of that went to the Ukrainian Red Cross Society in the early days, but then since then we decided to broaden the scope a little bit and include some other charities. For example, Music Saves UA is another charity which Vlad and the Atlas team were really responsible for starting. And that's, again, it's another humanitarian organization where they deal with similar things to the Red Cross Society as far as evacuating civilians, delivering humanitarian aid across the country. And they also do other work. For example, they bring over representatives from the music industry from other countries, UK, Canada, etc. They bring them to Ukraine and they highlight what's going on the ground, and just to make sure that people really realize what's happening here. And they also campaign for getting Ukrainian artists booked onto international festivals, which is a really good initiative. So Vlad is instrumental in that, and yeah, so those are the charities that we support.
Yeah. How important is it for foreigners to support Ukraine?
Super important. I think it's absolutely critical. I mean, if we're talking about individuals, very important. And also awareness, because it's easy when there's so many things going on in the world for what's happening in Ukraine to get kind of brushed under the carpet. But I think it's important that people realize we're still very much in the thick of a war right now, a serious one. And if people don't keep talking about it, if they don't keep spreading the word about what's happening and ensuring that people are aware of it, I'm worried that it's just gonna, the popularity of people giving money to Ukraine and talking about it is gonna decline, and that's a real concern.
Okay, so say if there's someone watching this show and they're sitting on their couch in their flat in Norwich, what can they do to help?
Well, I think they can look at charitable organizations, things like United 24, and just keep your eyes and ears out for charitable organizations that are helping Ukraine. Spread the word. Post on social media about when there are attacks from Russia on Ukraine, and just make sure that people are aware of what's happening. And really just not allowing it to fall silent.
Yeah, and you're from the UK. I want to talk a bit about politics. Boris Johnson, he was a very kind of well-respected person in Ukraine after the full-scale invasion. How do you feel about Bojo?
Yeah, so Boris Johnson, so I understand why he is popular here. I understand why people look favorably upon him here, because to his credit, he did a lot in the very early days of the war to galvanize support from other European and world leaders for Ukraine. He was very vocal in support, and I think the UK was one of the fiercest leaders certainly in the very early days of supporting Ukraine. So have to say that he was very important in that regard. But if we talk about him more generally, I don't have a particularly positive viewpoint on him, just purely because he was one of the instigators of the Brexit campaign, which, as far as the UK is concerned, has set the UK on a really, really negative trajectory. And so I think he's actually quite damaging to the UK as a country, albeit he did some positive things for Ukraine. So yeah, mixed opinions on him, really.
Well, totally. People here love him. I think they named a street after him somewhere in Kyiv or something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about the new Prime Minister,
Rishi Sunak?
Yeah, Sunak.
Yeah. So I mean, there are many problems with the UK government at the moment, and the fact is, Rishi Sunak, he wasn't elected by anybody, by any public. By any public vote.
Oh, yeah.
He was put in there because the previous Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who was also not elected by public vote, was in office for a month and a half because, she did a lot of damage to the economy and generally was not seen very favorably. So, yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in the current UK government, but we have an election coming up on July the 4th, where I'm pretty sure there's going to be a drastic change in the government.
Okay, and What is this? What does this election mean for Ukraine? Like, is there a certain party that if they get elected, then there'll be less help for Ukraine?
No. So the good thing about the UK is that it doesn't really matter whether it's the Conservative Party who are in power at the moment or the Labour Party who are likely to become into power. There's unified support for Ukraine, hands down. So even if we do have a change of government, it won't impact the support for Ukraine in any way. So yeah, that's a good thing. But yeah, certainly the UK needs change. But thankfully, the UK will always be firmly behind Ukraine, 100%.
Yeah, we have an election coming up this year as well in my home country. And if one party wins, then yeah, Ukraine aid might be stalled, delayed, or just non-existent.
Yeah, it's potentially very problematic because how much support the US has given to Ukraine, and Western support is just super important, obviously for Ukraine's success in this war. I think if the Western support doesn't match, or at the very least match, but ideally exceed the amount of resources that Russia is putting into their side of the battle, then Ukraine could be in a very, very perilous situation. I think that's, ensuring Western support remains consistent and strong is going to be absolutely vital to the success for Ukraine. Because, we've just seen in Russia government changes there. They appointed Andriy Belousov as their Minister of Defense, and he's an economist. So kind of gives you some idea as to what the Russian government are thinking as to this war. They're thinking, we need to put our economy on a war footing. We need to make sure that we're able to sustain the kind of defense spending that they're going to need in order to beat Ukraine. So if the collective West don't get their head out of the sand and start supporting Ukraine to the same or more, then I think, it's not a fair fight.
Oh, no, true. And when it comes to kind of the end of the war, it's got to end sometime, right? I know you have an idea on how you want it to end, but how do you think it will end?
Well, it's really hard to say. And I think it does come down to, as I said, Western support and how strong and how consistent that can be. If they can beat Russia's resources spending, which they should be able to do, because the collective West, if you look at the respective GDPs of the West versus Russia, the West has the resources to do it, but just does it have the political will to do it? It's just whether or not all of the leaders of the US, UK, Europe, can they get together and can they continue to provide the support that Ukraine's going to need? Because if they can't, then it's, as I say, it's not a fair fight, and Ukraine can't be expected to win this war unless they get the support that is going to match the aggressor. So there are certain things which are being discussed at the moment. For example, there's an economist called Tim Ash, who I follow, who has been studying Ukraine for many decades. He's super clued up on the situation. And he's made the point that there's $330 billion of immobilized Russian central bank assets in Western jurisdictions. And why can't we use that? Why can't we give that to Ukraine to fund its defense? Because currently our policymakers are basically making Western taxpayers pay for Ukraine's defense when there's all this money that's immobilized sitting there, which we should be using first to help Ukraine.
So why aren't we using it then?
Exactly. And it should be a scandal, really, that we're not using it. So essentially, EU policymakers and leaders are saying, well, we would rather put the interests of Russia and Russian taxpayers ahead of our own taxpayers, which is just crazy. So yeah, things like that, where if they can just get these hurdles, get past these hurdles and get these things unlocked, then I think Ukraine has, a much, much stronger chance of being successful in this.
Do you think there's any use in trying to negotiate with Russia?
No, I don't think so. I think, any negotiations that you have with Russia or any agreements, they're not worth the paper that they're written on, to be honest. So I don't think so. I think at this point, you just kind of have to fight fire with fire and support and arm Ukraine as best as it needs. Don't hold back. And if there's opportunities like with these immobilized assets, use them. Certainly, that should be the first thing to do. Because I don't think the people in the EU, I don't think they quite understand what's going to happen if Ukraine loses this war, which is possible. And there's things like, for example, the Ukraine Recovery Conference. There's another one in 2 weeks in Berlin. That's like putting the cart before the horse, because the war's. How can you talk about recovery and reconstruction if the war's still going on and you don't even know if there will be a Ukraine at the end of it? How can you reconstruct a country that doesn't exist? So things like that, which really wind me up, because it's like, you need to support Ukraine now. Use all of your assets, use everything at your disposal, and then maybe Ukraine will be in a better position where, the end of the war can seem a more realistic possibility. Because at the moment, we're just in this grinding war of attrition, and nobody knows how it's going to end. So yeah, it's very, very frustrating.
Oh yeah, of course. What if there's like some sort of negotiation and they say Russia keeps what they have now, but then Ukraine joins NATO, and if Russia tries to do some aggression again, then Article 5 will be triggered and there'll be like a larger scale of war. Would you be down for this?
I mean,
you're not Ukrainian, so maybe it's hard for you to say, but
it's difficult for me to say.
Yeah.
It's really you have to leave it up to the government, the Ukrainian government. If that is a deal that they decide is in their best interests, then of course, you get on board with it. But it feels dangerous because, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And just because they say they've signed an agreement saying, we're not going to attack anymore, you can't really believe that, as far as I'm concerned. So I'd be very wary about it. But then again, I'm not a politician. I'm certainly not Ukrainian, and so I can't speak for the government. But I think we have to have faith that the government will do the right thing. And if they're proposed a solution which may end the war on terms which are agreeable to Ukraine, then I'm sure they'll want to look at that.
Yeah, to me, victory is, the pre-2014 borders, Crimea and all of Donbass. But a lot of people are saying that, Donbass is basically like towns, cities, like leveled. A lot of Ukrainian people like left already, and they just got replaced with pro-Russian people or Russian people. And some people say it's a lost cause. Have you been to Donbass?
Never been to Donbass, no.
What would you say to these people then?
It's a valid point. You see how these cities and these towns are getting wiped off the map. And I can understand why people would feel that way. I can understand why they'd say that territory is a lost cause. Let's not continue fighting and losing lives for the sake of regaining this territory, which is, in their eyes, maybe is pointless. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I think I understand why people think that. I think it's the loss of life, which is really the thing that people want to just put an end to as soon as possible. People don't want to feel like they're fighting a useless or pointless war. And I hope that for everybody's sake, we can get to a resolution as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think so as well. But yeah, we reached our time. So I'll tell you what, this is how we're going to do the end, Rhys. If you want to kind of plug any organization, if you want to plug your socials, go ahead and look at that camera and just plug away, man.
Cool. Well, together with Ukraine, I'd love to just make people aware of this album that we're still selling. We have it on Bandcamp. We'll put a link in the description, and every pound that we raise goes to a selection of Ukrainian humanitarian charities. So we'd love to continue supporting those, and every donation is helpful.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming on, Rhys.
Thank you.
And for all of you watching at home, if you like this video, if you like Rhys as a guest, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you just want to chat with me or Rhys in the comment section, maybe about his beautiful wife, Irina, and how she can introduce you to Zelensky, you can leave a comment down below as well. But I'm first in line, okay? To meet Zelensky through Irina. But anyways, joking aside, Rhys, it's a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
And what I like to do at the end of the cast, I like to shake the guest's hand. Why don't you get over here, man? Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you.
Cheers, Rhys.
Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.